She's going from a nonprofit in Canada to a for-profit consultancy and getting paid nothing.
You know, a lot of us try to chase that freedom and are bound by our financial situation.
Work, no matter what, has a contract involved. You get paid. You may not get paid enough. What is enough? Most people, their egos get in the way and they go, oh my gosh, I'm making this much. This is not the life that I envision. But these things take time. I'm willing to make $500 a month for a year and a half of my career because I'm learning so much in that job that I know that I will be worth 10 times that in 2 years from now. Some of my best memories in life are from when I was poor.
I still found it difficult for me. I thought I was needed to be an investment banker in order to gain as much knowledge as possible and work hours that are crazy in order to get all the skills I need to be able to have the freedom I want.
I have so many friends who took the path that you took, and that's why I give that cautionary tale. You actually took the harder path for freedom.
I guess first and foremost, thank you for coming on the show and agreeing to do this. We spoke briefly, but enough for you to pique my curiosity on a few things, honestly. So thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
So I was thinking about this a few weeks ago. Every phase of my life, I look back and I look at myself and I realize that I'm a different person. So if I were to walk into a room, I would introduce myself differently. And if I put them across each other and I take a look, it's like a completely different person. Just based off of the phase that I'm in, the experiences I've had, what I'm working on at that time, and how much I've developed and matured. So I'm just curious for you in the phase that you're in right now. You walk into a room and you don't know anybody.
Yeah. How do you
introduce yourself usually?
Yeah, that's a really tough question because it depends on, I would say, the audience as well, right? But as I've gotten older, I'm 40 now. What I've realized is we're really all multidimensional beings. And the older I've gotten, I've realized that I need to own all of those pieces. And that's really hard because the older you get, if you're curious, and in the world that we live in now, a lot of people have multiple jobs, multiple side hustles, projects, things that they're passionate about. Yeah, so it changes depending on who I'm with. But for I guess the purposes of this podcast, I can say that I'm an entrepreneur, founder of a tech startup, a recovering strategy consultant after 15 years, a dog mom, Canadian, Japanese, half, and someone really, really devoted to expansion. I would say I'm an expansionist of my body, mind, and soul. And if I actually look back over the 40 years, that's the exact order of my growth. And so I started out, I always said my first love was basketball, and I played basketball for McGill University in Canada. Not very well, I might add, in my final years. And then obviously, university education went from McGill, then I did a postgrad at Cambridge, and then later in life, an executive MBA at Stanford. So really trying to expand my mind in the traditional sense and also the non-traditional sense. Studied many different things from neuropsychology to sustainability to then, of course, an executive MBA, which is more in the business realm. And then soul has been really my calling now, which is how to expand myself on the spiritual warrior's path. And that's what one of my podcasts is about. It's Enlightened DXB podcast is about all of the tools and healing modalities and explorations for that. So it's really hard to introduce myself, but I would say if I were to break it down in those three things, those are the areas in which I'm constantly trying to expand.
Okay. Mind, body, soul.
Mind, body, soul.
It's a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe let's just start with mind. And you said that was earlier on in your life.
Yeah.
Did that start with your pursuit in education or even before that? Like how did you develop that aspect?
Yeah, I think if we all look back, even now, a lot of people are calling on the education systems to be sort of re-looked at and reinvented. But in my generation, and having a tiger Japanese mom, and a dad who's a scientist they really believed in education. I grew up probably similar to the Arab families
Yes.
here, where my parents didn't come to my undergrad graduation. They didn't even come to my post-grad graduation. They basically were like, if you don't have a master's or a PhD or something beyond that, that's not a real education.
So that wasn't even enough for them.
No, and for me, by the time I was in my mid-20s, I was so focused on like getting out into the world that it didn't really bother me. But They did, when I was 33, I graduated from Stanford, 33 or 34, and I invited the whole family, and I said, this is probably my last traditional education. You guys need to be there for graduation, and we need to, cap it. But I was always curious, and I went into my Bachelor of Science for undergrad, and I would just say that I'm super curious, and this traditional education system worked for me, and it works for girls as well that are really curious and studious, right? I wasn't the most studious, but I was curious enough to roll up my sleeves, do the work, and ask the questions. And I've always had a wide angle. So even my Bachelor of Science, it was scientific pre-med courses, biochemistry, all of those things. But then I fell in love with psychology, which has always been something, if I look back to my youth, I was always curious about. I'm just curious about human relationships, how humanity forms, how social groups form, how different countries view each other, how we have individual egos and identities. Meanwhile, we all probably have more similarities than differences.
Absolutely.
And so relationships always called to me, romantic relationships always called to me, investing in community and a solid group of friends that would have honest conversations with you. These are things that I've always been passionate about. And so then studying the neurobiology of it, of how does your brain work? And that, at the time 20 years ago when I did my undergrad, and still to this day, the brain is the organ that we know the least about. Even to this day. And a lot of people say, Joe Dispenza or whatever, they say we use 9% of our brain. And so imagine if we're capable of using more of it. And the other thing I would say is the traditional, why we might have to reinvent our education system is the traditional education system, the one that you and I went through and went to college and university, that's really uses only one side of our brain, probably our left side of the brain. And that's really structural, our prefrontal cortex, decision-making, it's these sort of things. The other side of the brain is probably where I am now really more interested in, which is instead of being a human doing, like how do we do more, optimize more, think more, it's how can we be a human being and just be.
So is that the creative side?
It's actually, creativity, I think, is born from that side. It's more fluid. You might have, spontaneous ideas that come from that place. But it's also this place of deep rest where we don't have to be overproductive.
I see what you mean.
Where we can actually sit still, whether you get that through meditation or these moments of really just sitting with what is versus constantly distracting yourself with action. And you have to have both. They have to, it's yin and yang. You have to have them in equal capacity in order for both to expand.
And so the current educational system doesn't really allow us to sit in that state.
No.
Or encourage us.
I remember at 26, I took a sabbatical and I went to India and, maybe I had my own eat, pray, love moment, but I went to a yoga ashram for a month. And there were a bunch of these Indian parents that were there. And they said, I've come here for a month to really empty myself so that I can show up better for my children. And they were telling us how when they went through school, yoga was just a part of their education. Okay. And I thought, wow, how cool would that be if, we had that sort of education in the West. Or even when I first came out to the Middle East 18 years ago, there was a couple of devout Muslims I worked with, and they would pray 5 times a day. They would take time out from their desks and go, okay, I need to go wash my hands and pray. And I thought, gosh, imagine if the whole world would just take that moment and go, okay, I just need to meditate for 10 minutes. Really makes me feel like it's that side of sort of habits that we're missing on the Western side of things.
Okay. And you learned that, I suppose, after education. So your traditional journey in education informed you from, a reading the books perspective on the psychology, the science behind all this. But then after that, it was all non-structured and living through life to get you to this point.
Yeah, and to be fair, because I think I have gotten used to a certain type of learning, which is, in the classroom or learning from a teacher. I have gone out and sought out mentors, not gurus per se, but mentors, or I go on specific retreats to learn from people that know more than I do. But also a lot of it is about putting yourself through more transformational experiences.
Yeah.
And that also can't be emulated in a classroom. You have to actually put yourself through those experiences.
Okay. Can you talk to me a little bit more about your career after you graduated, and what did you fall into first?
Yeah. So after I graduated McGill, I initially had an offer from GSK in pharmaceuticals, and I said no. But they were offering $80,000 at the time a year, which was really good. And my parents were like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
But at the time, I don't know if you recall, but I don't know what it is now, but working for drug companies and working for consulting and banking they all seem kind of like cool and good, cushy jobs, but they were also kind of seen as a little bit on the evil side, let's say.
Yeah, still do to a certain extent, I think. Yeah.
And so it was a bit ironic that I did eventually end up in the consulting world and private equity to some extent. But I actually left university and ended up working for a nonprofit organization. It's called ISEC, where it was all about youth empowerment. And it was an organization built after World War II with the idea that if we sent university students and graduates to international countries around the world, and they got a chance to work in these countries and expose different countries and people of these countries to other cultures, then another world war wouldn't happen, because there would be this global understanding that, this guy's my neighbor,
Okay.
And so I ended up working in business development for them, fundraising essentially. And I lived in Toronto for a year and a half doing that. It was a democratically elected position, so I ran for it.
You had to run for it.
I had to run for it. And it was an organization I volunteered for through my whole university education. It's kind of like Doctors Without Borders or Engineers Without Borders. And then after you graduate, you can lead the national team. And they were in like 106 countries at the time. So we would have like international conferences, and you could run for different positions.
Interesting. So you must know a lot of people then for to be in an organization this big, and to run as if you were in politics in order to be able to get in. It sounds like you were able to build a solid network of individuals.
Yeah, I was president of the organization at McGill. And so if you're in these leadership positions, it was across, I think we were in 32 universities at the time across Canada. We would have regular national leadership development conferences in the country where every school would bring like anywhere from 30 to 80 delegates. So these were huge conferences, and these big companies would come, and it was all about training, like soft skills development, technical skills, that sort of thing.
Okay. So if I were to try to map your path from that moment all the way up to Lucidity Insights, what are some of the key stops? Yeah.
So right after that, during that time, I was really interested in sustainability and CSR. And so I was trying to fundraise and build partnerships with a lot of companies in Canada that were doing CSR and sustainability stuff.
Okay.
And I met a lot of mentors that way. Like I was very much, trying to get people that could kind of direct me and help me in my career. And 3 or 4 of the mentors that I had developed in the sustainability space all said, "Hey, our all of us share a mentor. And he's actually closing up his nonprofit, which was doing sustainability CSR work in Ottawa. And he's moving with his Palestinian Canadian wife to the Middle East to open up the first sustainability for-profit consultancy in the Middle East.
Okay.
And why don't you go take an internship with him? And we, jumped on a few calls, and he offered me a role to be his biz dev person because I didn't have any consulting skills at that point. So moved to Jordan, Amman, Jordan, because his wife got a job with Queen Rania. So he started it there. And then I worked with him for 5 years, expanding sustainability consultancy through the Middle East. And within the first 9 months, we had won so much business and we didn't have enough consultants on the team that I wrangled into a consulting role, and then ended up growing there from senior up the chain of consultancy.
Okay.
And then I took a sabbatical when I was 26 for a year to see if I could not work for a year and fill my time, which I figured out that I could, and I could probably do it for a lot longer, which surprised me. There was a running bet amongst my friends that I was such a workaholic that they were like, Erika won't last 2-3 months. And I was kind of taking a few interviews with BBC and a few other places, and I really had to work at not working. But that was the start of that. And then when I came back, continued to work with the firm for 2 years, and I got headhunted by a growth strategy consultancy that worked on working with Fortune 500 companies covering Turkey to Japan and helping these big enterprises with go-to-market strategies in India or Indonesia or Japan, what have you.
Okay.
And I always thought when I first came to the region that I would end up expanding to Asia. And so it was a perfect fit. A couple years later, I made partner. I built out the Middle East operations for them, which was very profitable. And then I went to Stanford for a year and a half. And then I came back, sold the firm. We listed on the Japanese stock exchange in Tokyo. And then the golden handcuffs came off. So in 2020, I, in the middle of COVID, started my own boutique consultancy here where I started more catering not just to the Fortune 100 and Fortune 500 clients that I had, but also to startups. And one thing led to another. Okay. And then I started a tech startup.
Okay, that's a lot to unpack, and I'm not sure where to start. But what I'm curious about is what drove you to make those decisions quickly? Was it was it calculated decisions, or was it you're just a very insanely curious person and you like adventure? And
I definitely like adventure. When I was quite young, I knew that I wanted an international career. So that was my North Star. I knew that I wanted a career outside of Canada and potentially outside of North America. And if it was in North America, I wanted it to be one that was filled with travel. I was obsessed with seeing the world. So I think I've traveled to like 80 countries, and that was always a goal. So I had goals like this from a very young age. I think even when I didn't have a lot of money, I would spend it to go to Peru and see Machu Picchu. And as soon as I could start affording to travel more, by the time I was in my early 20s, I made a goal that I would travel to at least 3 new countries every year. So that was a target, and that's fallen off now. And I remember saying I'm going to go to every continent by the time I'm 30. And I think I did that besides Antarctica, and I still haven't been to Antarctica. Okay. So that's still there. So that was a bit of a North Star. But I would say something else that I remember being really guided by when I was young was I learned a concept in university called the hedonic treadmill. Have you heard of it?
Hedonic treadmill?
Yeah, the hedonic treadmill.
That sounds scary. Like a torture device.
It is scary.
Okay.
The premise of the hedonic treadmill is that our psychology as humans, we reset the baseline very quickly. And so if you can imagine, they've done studies on this of lottery winners, for example, and people think it would change their lives to win $1 million or $10 million, put whatever number you want. And the truth is most of them would, be super elated for a few weeks or months, but actually within like a 6-month period, most reported feeling less satisfied or the same level of satisfaction that they felt before. Right? We have an internal set happiness level. We just will always get there. At the same time, we get accustomed. What does that mean? We get accustomed to things very easily. Oh, wow, I couldn't pay the bills before. Now I can pay the bills and I have a yacht and I'm still equally as happy as I was when I couldn't pay the bills. Yeah. And so what that taught me quite young, or the lesson that I took away from that, was don't do things for money. Don't do things for material things. Do things that you really love and are curious about, and trust that the money will come. And so that's why I said no to the GSK pharmaceutical job and went and was on the poverty line where I think I made $24,000 that year. And I didn't realize I was on the poverty line. In Toronto, that's a very low amount of money to live off of. Yeah. Lived in a shoebox. And then I think I went to one of those H&R blocks to do my taxes like that March. And it was $50 to file. And they were like, oh, you're good. It's free. And I was like, what do you mean? I thought it was $50. And they were like, oh, no, well, you don't make enough money for us to charge you. And that was when I realized, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm poor. Yeah. I didn't know that I was poor, but this person is telling me that I'm poor. Like,
that's another way of learning, or someone telling you politely.
Yeah, I knew I had to be really frugal, but I didn't realize, like, I was like, oh, I'm on the poverty line.
Interesting.
And then funny enough, when I went to go work for a for-profit consultancy, because it was in Jordan, my internship, it was, I was making, I think, 350 JDs, Jordanian dinars, my first year, which was less than $600 a month, which is a lot less than what I was making before. So my parents at this point are having a hernia. Not only do I want to go to the Middle East where they're like, what is this girl doing, by herself? Yeah. But she's going from a nonprofit in Canada to a for-profit consultancy and getting paid nothing. But honestly, I worked really hard because I was so passionate about it, and I knew that I had the grit. Within a few years, I was running that consultancy. I was leading all of the sales for that consultancy. I was the most senior consultant there. And my CEO is a bit of a Steve Jobs type, a little challenging, but incredibly brilliant. And I learned a lot from him. And so also being very strategic and picking opportunities where I thought, this is going to expand me. I think that was always the thing.
Okay, so it wasn't more of I have a chip on my shoulder, I'm trying to prove to myself that I'm good enough. It was more so
expansion geographically, expansion. Even university, I wanted to be 5,000 kilometers away from home. Not because I was running away from home, but because I didn't want a safety net where I could just, drive home on the weekends and cry if something was not going well. I did want to prove to myself a little bit, like I was capable of being self-sufficient so that I could go out into the world. Like I really, from like a very young age, remember reading National Geographics going, I thought I was going to be like a National Geographic journalist or something like that, you know? Yeah. And I think that was always my desire. Like I just had big dreams, and I didn't know where the line of that dream was, because it was a dream. You don't know what it feels like to be in some foreign land. And that's what I wanted. I wanted a life that I couldn't even imagine.
A lot of us try to chase that freedom and are bound by our financial situation, right? So if I'd like to have the freedom to explore, but I have to feed myself.
Yeah.
So how, like if you were to give somebody young a piece of advice, because they have to chase money, they have to feed themselves at a certain point in time. And if they're lucky enough, they feed themselves while doing something maybe they're very curious about. But if they don't have that luxury, they will have to chase money up until a certain point and hit that wall of,
work, no matter what, has a contract involved. You get paid, right? Mm-hmm. You may not get paid enough. What is enough? Most people, their egos get in the way and they go, oh my gosh, I'm making this much. This is not the life that I envision. But these things take time. I'm willing to make $500 a month for a year and a half of my career because I'm learning so much in that job that I know that I will be worth 10 times that in 2 years from now. I didn't really know that, but I could also feed myself. They weren't paying me something where I was like, yeah, okay, I could pay for the taxi to take me to work every day. Okay. I could feed groceries. I lived with friends that I really loved that became some of my lifelong friends. Some of my best memories in life are from when I was poor, figuring things out, doing things that are difficult, and going, wow, I ran out of money 2 weeks ago and I'm still figuring out how to cook stuff up from stuff that I found in my kitchen or, what have you. So I think that stuff builds character and confidence. And so it's not an either or question. It's what is the bare minimum you need in order to feed yourself twice a day, or however often you eat. I don't think you need to eat 3 times a day, but and ultimately, what is it that you want out? And so my equation for that is different now, obviously, than it was before. And again, the hedonic treadmill comes up because now if I were to change careers, I have a set point of I have to make this much or at least this much, because otherwise I would be going backwards so far. But actually, that's a paradigm I'd like to break as well, because at some point, and as an entrepreneur, obviously, I had to break that paradigm. I wasn't going to make the same as a partner at a global firm. But then pretty quickly, I was able to do it, because that set point had already been set as well.
Okay. I still found it difficult for me. And maybe it was an educational piece when I was a little bit younger. I thought I was needed to be an investment banker in order to gain as much knowledge as possible and work hours that are crazy in order to get all the skills I need to be able to have the freedom I want. And I quickly realized I could hit 40 or 50 or 60 and still be far away from the freedom I'm looking for, just because I'm shoving my head in the sand and not really taking a step back and understanding the equation that you're talking about.
I have so many friends who took the path that you took, and that's why I give that cautionary tale. You actually took the harder path for freedom.
Yeah.
Most people, I know one girl, Janet Cho, who I went to McGill with. She was brilliant. She was my chief financial officer at McGill for ISEC, and she ended up working at a big New York investment bank as well. And she made a promise to herself and to me, she said, Erika, I'm going to give it 4 years. And it doesn't matter if I become the president, which you wouldn't, but the president of this investment bank, I'm going to leave in 4 years and then I'm going to go work for the IFC and World Bank because that's what I want to do. And she had a very clear strategy, but she said in 4 years, I'm out no matter what. And she did do that. And she's done exceptionally well.
Okay.
But because of the hedonic treadmill, you kind of screwed yourself, right? Yeah. Because of the salary you're making, you can't justify leaving. You're like, well, I'm kind of good at this. I'm kind of learning new things. I'm not happy, but wow, I'm getting paid more than any other industry. Why are you getting paid that much? You got to ask yourself those questions, right? Mm-hmm. But if you reverse the equation and go, I'm going to maybe it's not that I was chasing making the least amount of money, but to say, I don't care if I get even paid for this, so long as I have enough money here and there to survive, but I'm going after the thing that I'm most passionate about. And I know that if I follow my love, if I follow my current, if I follow my heart, then eventually the money will follow, because I will be way better at this job than some Joe Schmo that took the job because they thought it pays well or it's a cool industry to work in.
Okay.
So it flips the script to go, don't chase the money, chase what you are curious and are so passionate about that you're going to work 100 times harder than everybody else, and it's going to be playtime for you.
Yeah.
And then you become the best in the business.
Okay. Yeah, I like the concept of cashing in on your skill set, and the longer you wait before cashing in on your skill set, the better. And what that means is you're not in it for the money as per se, but you're more so in it to stack up on the skills that you already have and double down to so that 10 years, 20 years down the road, you could choose to monetize that skill set and get that freedom.
Yeah.
And that's how I was thinking about it.
And even in consulting, for example, I remember we were a small boutique consultancy. We were startup consultancy. I was employee number 3, and we were building from the ground up. I learned so much more being in close proximity to my CEO than my friends who are working at McKinsey down the road on similar projects that we were working on. But what did they do for the first 2 years of their better paid consulting analyst gigs? They were note takers in meetings. I was arranging meetings and having meetings. I was actually closing deals. And yes, it's a much steeper learning curve, but my gosh, I had far more skills than my counterparts in these bigger firms that seemed more prestigious, that paid more, right? So that's the equation.
I agree with you. I actually failed at being an investment banker because I never made it into investment banking. But I picked up a few books and I started reading up on real estate being a potential path to financial freedom, as everybody in Canada is trying to get into real estate. But that led me to conversations with some of the bigger developers in the city. Just out of curiosity, I'd ask them questions, and one of them said, "Hey, we have a position opening." And I definitely did not have the skill set, but he just thought I was curious enough that I should apply and see what
100%.
happens. And I found myself in a room with that constantly with that guy that kind of recommended this, who was sort of my mentor, the CFO and the owner of the company, always looking at potential deals and development projects. And I quickly started understanding how how they think, what took them years to get to that point, and the thought process behind every single investment or every single project or every single partnership too, right?
Yeah.
I could not have learned that if I moved to Toronto and went to like CIBC for investment banking and whatnot.
It's a perfect example. I mean, what I'm hearing, mentorship is hugely important. If you can find someone to believe in you. And you don't get someone to believe in you if you're just showing up to a job for a paycheck.
No.
You have to be curious. The other piece is you're so curious, and I've had this happen to me so often, especially when I was young. I was just so curious. It wasn't like I was trying to one-up anybody. I was just like, how can we do this better? Just asking those questions. And that is such an asset for a business owner. And now that I own multiple businesses, I'm like, man, when I see that in team members, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to take you and I'm going to pour so much of my energy and knowledge and wisdom in you, because if I can make you as good or better than me, amazing. Like, you're going to do so well for the business and you're going to take care of me, and I'm going to take care of you.
That's actually a good point. So how do you pick a team member if you're starting a new project or if you're expanding as you do? How do you pick the right people to be around you? Is it that curiosity that you look for in a conversation with them that says, okay, that's all I need from you?
Yeah, they have to have the basics. But there are people I have hired that have no experience in what I'm doing. And I just know that they're good human beings and they are willing to put in the sweat equity to learn where they have gaps. And they're the type of people that make me feel good. Like most people will lie to you and be like, there's a matrix and we should do this and there shouldn't be biases. But a lot of, especially for my startup, I brought on people that I worked with for 10 years at other companies. And then I said, hey, come on over. And it worked. And when I hire new people, it's really a gut feel. I have to say, like, I know we're trying to build AI systems that remove all of these biases in place, but is this guy hungry enough? Is this what she really wants to do? Does she want to learn from me? Okay. Are they coachable? Are they mentorable? Because that trajectory changes dramatically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We spoke a little bit about the mind, and you said mind, body, soul. Mm-hmm. I'd like to get into the body part of it. And one thing that really caught my attention in our brief conversation before this was, I think you mentioned that so far you've spent over $1 million on development. How much of that was body? Like, how much of that was making sure you're fit enough to be?
It's hard to say. I would say more than half was on the mind.
Okay.
Yeah, just also because of the costing of these things, right? But like I have a coach for, I like coaches. And so I have a coach for everything, and I have a PT as well. I started investing in that a few years ago, more avidly. I also have but it all kind of melts into multiple areas. But I told myself if I'm going to work out this religiously, then I'm going to definitely make sure that I get a fascioskeletal massage, like a deep tissue massage for recovery every week. That starts to add up. I've gone on trips just for, kind of cleansing, but it's also a mix of things. So I do detoxes that are very, very expensive sometimes, where I fast for 7 days. Obviously, I wouldn't do that without supervision.
Okay.
And then there's a bigger chunk, I would say now, that comes from the spiritual aspect, because body was first, actually. When I was younger, I was very athletic and I was doing all of these things. And then now it's like really maintenance and making sure that I keep my health first and foremost. I spend a lot of money on supplements. I have a supplement stack. I've been a biohacker and a sleep hacker since probably 10 or 12 years ago. I bought my first Oura Ring in their first generation. So I've always been curious, and if you can give me the data to show how my body's reacting, I'm down. CGM monitors, yeah. So it adds up. It adds up.
And so is that a solid driver of your performance? I guess outside of athleticism, like you taking care of your body and exercising, making sure you're fit. How does that translate to your success outside of?
It's a health. Ultimately, like if you've ever been really, really sick, and touch wood, I haven't been crazy sick, but I have had moments like a few years ago where I thought, gosh, I don't know if I'm going to make it. Like doctors couldn't tell me what I was fighting off. It was very short lived, but it was like a week and a half, really high fever, and my white blood cells were like non-existent, and so I had a moment where I was like, oh, yeah. And people have them all the time, where they say, if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. And I couldn't work. I literally couldn't get out of bed to walk my dog. You really don't have anything if you don't have your health. And I say that to my parents all the time as well. And so to me, the goal is, when I was young, I used to ski and snowboard a lot, and I would see these older 70, 80-year-olds going down the mountain. Sometimes I go rock climbing and I'll see a 70-year-old killing it, better than I can do. And I'm like, God, I want to be that when I'm 80 or 90. And so pushing my body to also expand has always been just another edge for me to push. Climb Kilimanjaro for my 33rd birthday. I just like doing those sort of things.
Okay.
And the maintenance of it, I would say now, is on the premise that if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. But it's also about optimizing performance, because I'm getting into the perimenopausal age now where it's a thing. Brain fog is a thing. These things where you're like, wow, I had a memory of a trap door before, and now I feel like it's not what it used to be. It's also probably because I have my attention on so many more things than when I was like a super focused 20-something-year-old that just had one job, But yeah, I test out different supplements. I like mushrooms, nootropics. I try out everything, and whatever works well. And I'm on a whole detox stack right now, because I have a few heavy metals in my body that's been building up. Yeah.
Okay. I think, you mentioned you did basketball when you were younger, and I think that never left you, but not the basketball part, but the athlete part.
Yeah.
And I see you as an athlete, not only when you're working out, when you're talking about the workouts and the regimen that you're following, but also I think from the growth aspect that you alluded to, where you keep on going, you're trying to expand and test new limits.
I've had to, interestingly, in recent years, I've had to reprogram some of the things that I learned as an athlete, because at a young age, it really worked. Some adage old sayings like, no pain, no gain.
Yeah.
I don't believe in that anymore. I believed in that heavily when I was young, up until recently, actually. I used to pull all-nighters for work, and I was like, no pain, no gain. Like, I remember there was a Michael Jordan quote that said, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. I still follow. There's a lot of these sport anecdotes that I follow into life, but there's a lot that I've had to let go of because they're actually not helpful anymore. No pain, no gain is definitely one of them. Like, you have to know the limits of your body, and yes, do hard things, but if you're in pain, then you've gone too far. And rewriting that script. There was also another one that was like, while you're sleeping, somebody else is chasing after that job you want, or putting in more hours than you, right? And so I really was in a lot of sleep debt when I was in my 20s. And I really tried to start reconfiguring that in my early 30s, where I was like, nah, this isn't healthy.
Okay, interesting. I find that my approach is changing as well. You said you optimize for sleep. I'm curious what you do, because I'm starting to build a regimen as well for sleep. And the one night where I don't sleep well, I completely feel it in my performance at work. And I don't know if it's a psychological thing, because when I was younger, I never really took that into consideration or thought that one less, hour of sleep makes a difference. So I wonder if it's all psychological, where you go like, no, I need the 8 hours of sleep. And then if you get it, that reinforces behavior.
Yeah. So sleep is one of those scientific areas that are also, like, when I was studying it, I did take or at least a portion of a course in my undergrad days where it came up. It came up a lot at Stanford. There's a lot of sleep researchers there. But it's still a really nascent stage. Again, because we still don't know that much about the brain. Yeah. We do know a couple of things. We know the different stages of sleep: light sleep, REM sleep, deep sleep, and what am I missing? I'm missing a fourth one. All of them are super important. And depending on your genetics, you will have sort of different levels of different things. So I'm genetically a light sleeper. And so that means I have way more light sleep than you probably do or somebody else does. And I have to optimize for deep sleep. Why deep sleep? So REM sleep, I get good. REM is where you're basically, your mind is cataloging everything that you learned that day and categorizing them in memory, storage, all of these things. Super important. Deep sleep, though, if you don't get enough of it, which when I was not optimizing for it, I was getting like 30 minutes a night, it is aging my brain super fast. Like, you want to have an hour minimum of deep sleep a night. And I had to work at it. Like, I was like, wow, these things are wrong. I started getting different Fitbits, all sorts of things. I was like, man, this tech is probably off. And it really started to bother me, and I had to really work at it. But deep sleep is where you go into cellular repair. So if you're working out and you're putting a lot of strain on your body, and not just that, if you have a lot of cortisol running in your body, which any ambitious person does, we're in low-grade, inflammation and cortisol a lot, which is why sometimes I dream about, running off and living in the wilderness. But this is the time for your brain to detox. And if you only have 30 minutes of it, it's not enough. An hour. I have friends who get 2-3 hours of deep sleep, and I'm so jealous. So jealous. Their body is like, our bodies are amazing things that have the capacity to repair itself, but we have to optimize for that. And also, again, I said genetically, there's a difference as well. And so, I mean, this is not medical advice at all. Everyone should get their own data for their own body. And, we're coming in a time where precision healthcare is more and more going to be a reality. Like, our kids will probably grow up in a place where there isn't like a standardized approach to everyone. Like, everyone will have like the exact milligram of a supplement according to their biology and genetics. But for me, I take glycine at night, magnesium, L-theanine. These are all things that help calm the body. Apigenin, which is an extract from chamomile, and I don't like chamomile tea, so I just take the supplement. And these are all things that basically reduce your stress load. It stops the mental chatter. Again, we talked about mind. I really spent so much time focused on mind. I was a strategy consultant. I've spent all my time in my brain imagining all of the things. I still love playing chess with my partner. Like, I'm very a mental analytical person. But what that means is it's hard to shut it off at night.
Yeah.
And, sometimes I do certain types of hypnotherapy or different things. And they're like, wow, your brain, like you were just twitching the whole time. Like obviously things are running. So because of that being my signature of how my body works and how my mind works, I cool down temperature of your place, make sure you have blackout curtains, and keep your phone away from no screens for the last few hours. I have an alarm to go to bed. Most people have alarms to wake up, but I have an alarm to go to bed.
Okay.
So there's these sorts of disciplined areas that I try and apply some discipline to.
Do you recommend the Aura Ring or the other? I don't know what
I did
what
it for
else is out there.
years, but actually the one that I have now is Ultra Human, and I switched over because I was like, okay, I have 10 years of data on Aura. A couple of years ago, I switched over probably because also I want to support local. Ultra Human is an Abu Dhabi / India company, and they have no subscription. And so I was also about optimizing my finances.
Okay.
So, and they also, they're great. They do blood work as well. You can order blood work and it loads onto the app. They also sell continuous glucose monitors for athletes. So I don't get it regularly now, but if I change something in my diet or if I want to kind of get some feedback for 2 weeks, I'll order a CGM, and it's all interlinked. So I like that.
Okay. That's pretty cool. I might...
Free plug-in for Ultra Human.
Yeah, I guess so. I might check it out, and I'll probably have after the show some questions for you because I'm curious about optimizing as well. But I wanted to go back a little bit to a point where I think I'm realizing quickly that for you, I don't know if you contemplate fear as much as the average person, and by fear maybe it's just like it seems like you're a person who sees something, understands it, and then makes a decision quickly. Compared to somebody else. And so I'm curious about you, how you view fear and what do you fear? Because you are a human being as well. So do you have a fear of some of the work that you do, or maybe some people call it, the younger generation say FOMO, what do you fear nowadays?
Yeah. Interesting that you say that. I have had moments of deep fear in my life and that I've had to work through. But I think, again, the calculation is the desire being stronger than the fear. And so even at Stanford, I gave like a Ask Me Anything lunch presentation on who I was. And I was like, my mantra for this year is love over fear. And part of the reason was I applied to Stanford and decided to do it then because I was in a long-distance relationship with my partner who was in California. So, as a Japanese Canadian girl, partner at a big, Asian consultancy, I couldn't just be like, okay, I'm going to just go on sabbatical for a year. Like I had to have Stanford as like my covert, reasoning to show, this girl's making smart decisions. But really, I went for love. And I also was grappling with fear at the time of like, I was getting older. I was already 33, 4, wondering if this was the right relationship, if I was going to have kids. I have a lot of fears around legacy and not reaching my fullest potential. And so I think I don't have fears around business or matrix. Of course, like we go through business issues, but somehow because I've spent so much time on my mind and my career, I have confidence that, we're smart enough people, we can figure it out. When it comes to personal relationships, maybe that's the area that I have the most fears around, and that's where some of my issues come out the most. And I think there was a time where I don't know if people can relate, but I feared dying alone. Not dying, like I'm like okay with dying, but losing family members, things like this. And so that was also a real portal for me for the spiritual area. My Japanese grandmother she passed away at 102 a few years ago. But my grandfather my step-grandfather, who she was married to when I was young, had died when I was 7. And that was the first time I learned that people could die. Yeah. I didn't really know until then. And I thought, oh my gosh, if grandpa just died, then my grandmother's probably next. And I was so attached to her, even though she lived, across the entire ocean and the world in Japan while I was in Canada. I don't know why, but my parents know this. Since a very young age, I've always said, Grandma, we called her Baba. Baba is my favorite person in the whole wide world. More than my parents, which I think they were happy to concede because she was a really special person. Okay. But that journey, and even me taking that sabbatical at 26, was because I had promised my grandmother that I would spend more time with her when I could. And I realized that all of a sudden she was 80, sorry. She had turned 80. And I was like, oh gosh, she's getting really old. And so I spent a chunk of that sabbatical, not just at a yoga ashram in India, but I actually went and lived with her in Japan for a few years. And to be honest, a lot of my journey of expanding my soul has been in understanding death and, what comes after, and what does life mean if we have to confront death. And, there was someone, I don't know, a motivational speaker or someone that I heard when I was in college that said, there's two numbers if you're going to get buried with a tombstone. There's two numbers, the year that you're born, and then there's the year that you die. And then there's a dash in the middle. What is going to be in the dash? That's your life. What sort of impact are you going to have? And there was another framing where they took a pie, said, this is your whole life. Imagine that, medicine gets better and we all live 100 years. Mm-hmm. We were in college already at that point. So let's say a quarter of your life is already gone. They colored it in. And then they said, and do you want family and kids? And when do you want that to start? And I was like, probably my mid-30s. And then they colored in the last quarter and said, well, you're going to be old and retired then. So really the only years you have to make impact is now until you decide to have a family. I mean, obviously it can continue, but when you have other responsibilities like a partner, kids, all of these things, you don't necessarily get to pick up and go, I just got a job in Hong Kong, let's go, You could, but it's different. The calculus is different. So if you want to make bold choices, do them now was basically the message. And I think I had fears that, I guess one of my fears is that I wouldn't live this life as optimally as I want to. And so I think about that a lot. Every year I kind of go, am I on the right track? Am I doing what I want? Am I leaving a mark, however insignificant? Am I using my time here in the world as best as I can? And am I spending it with the people that I want? And am I becoming the human being that I want to be when I die?
Do you dabble with religion? Have you dabbled with religion before?
I grew up atheist. My father is a scientist, but my grandmother was Buddhist, Shinto Buddhism, and my soul feels most at home in Japan. I have always been fascinated by religion. I've also been slightly petrified of organized religion. But my dad was always a good scholar. He would be go to Sunday school and go to the mosque and go to temple and just learn about them. But he also said, don't forget, they're just stories. So
he wanted you to be curious.
He wanted me to be curious, but don't get indoctrinated, basically. And it was in later life that I did find through my exploration of death and meaning. I have looked at all of the religions, but I would say I really started to explore my spirituality in a much broader sense of the term. And I've probably mid-30s, 35, 36 was when I, for the first time in my life, can say I found faith. I found faith in God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, but a greater power than myself.
And if you would describe that faith, does it look like anything we know right now? Is it a faith that is similar to Christianity, Islam, or any of the other religions? Or
The way
or
I look
schools?
at all the religions is that they all try and teach the same things, right? Ultimately, they try and teach you to be a good person, but that's not really what I was interested in. Or the stories of heaven and hell. I don't subscribe. I believe that they are teachings that were relevant to the times, and there are real wisdom in the Quran, in the Bible, and all of these things. But for me, it's more metaphysical. It's more about, if I'm totally honest,
Please be, yeah.
I would say many religions have lost their way. They're corrupted by power, like so many things, not just religion. It's just power corrupts, right? If it's not, if it's unbridled. And when I look at the world history, well, that's what I see. It became another empire, all of them that went down this route. I have more curiosity about the more mystical traditions. I mean, Sufism, for example. How could you not love a religion based on love? It literally has no interest in power. It has no interest in telling you how to behave and what is right or wrong. It has no desire for money. What it desires is to empower each individual to ask questions so that they can explore the capacity of their own soul, the depth of their heart. How connected are they to something beyond themselves, and allow them to decide what that is.
Okay.
I think that that's powerful.
So we kind of naturally segued into the soul part of mind, body, soul.
Yeah.
And I'm curious what that means to you, the soul part. Like, what have you done? What are you working on in your life in that segment?
I think it started with like where it was easiest for me. And so I started with psychology, which is more of the mind. And I can't remember why I went in, but I went to CBT. I think I'm a social smoker or was.
What is that?
A social smoker is someone that, when you go out with some groups of friends, you take a cigarette from them. And I wanted to go and quit. And I had learned that CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, really helps with that sort of thing. And so that was one thing. I can't remember. I'm sure there was something like relational that I went in for as well at the time, maybe going through a breakup or something. Okay. But quite quickly, CBT is very mental. It's very matter of fact. It reprograms your mind like a computer. It's just like a reboot.
Okay.
And after a few, maybe 6, 7, 8 months, I was like, this is helpful and interesting, but this isn't it. I want something deeper. And I started exploring hypnotherapy and child regression therapy and past lives and a lot of inner child work. A lot of people do that. And this is all about basically parenting all of the immature parts of you that maybe were stunted in growth, either because of it could be a traumatic experience, or maybe it's just you didn't have a capacity to develop that when you were younger for whatever reason. And so if we believe that we're multidimensional beings and there's multiple facets to our personalities, then maybe career Erika is like super, jacked. And maybe relational Erika is like kind of still stuck in her 20s. And maybe, like the athlete, the confidant, the podcaster, whatever, they're all at different maturity levels.
Interesting.
The empath, the person that can hold space, the person who can just be and meditate and be in complete silence and watch their thoughts without judgment. How mature are these parts? How mature are the parts that can be accused of something? Or how mature are the parts of you that can handle conflict? Can you sit in them without getting enraged? Can you sit in discomfort? These are the sorts of questions that I think, at least I started asking as I was going down this path. And a lot of that maturation you can't really concoct a life. You kind of, we all look for ease. And so we often don't test these parts. If anything, we're avoiding these parts. And so shadow work comes in to actually face those dark parts of you that you don't want to look at. And one thing has led to another over the years. And I've done everything from, I'll do anything once. So I've done plant medicine. I've done, really interesting shamanic rituals as well, even really transformational spaces where I can go into a different world. I've done archetypal work where...
Can you talk about that?
Shamanic stuff? Yeah. There's a lot of indigenous tribes around the world that, some people might call them like witch doctors, but really they were shamans, like spiritual leaders of their tribe that you would go to, like an oracle even. And they all had different modalities. And so some of them through music, some of them through meditation or Zen master. But in shamanism, it's a more primordial, older process. And I don't know the mechanics of it. I don't know the spiritual mechanics of it. But I have been teleported to a different state of being. Like, for example, I've gone through a shamanic experience where I re-experienced my birth, what it felt like to be in the first trimester and the second trimester and the third trimester. And I didn't have a third trimester because I was born premature, but and then being birthed. And what did that feel like to go from a soul entity somewhere floating in space, I don't know where we were before, to forming in this body? How much energy did it take? How much passion to be here? And then be birthed? And what did you remember? And what did you came here for? So these questions around, again, purpose and life and legacy come back to, well, did you have a plan for this life before you were inserted into my body that I get to inhabit for this lifetime? And so it sounds a bit woo-woo, and it is a bit woo-woo, but I love it. It's a felt experience. It's not something to be understood by the mind. It's literally a physical transformation. There's been shamanic rituals where I have metaphorically, someone has cut off my head. I've gouged out my heart, and then I've been living in my animal body without my head and heart for, a few days. And what does it mean without being, names have been taken away, and to live in that space where there's no ego, there's no mind, there's no heart? What are the animalistic parts to us that come out then? And it's just fascinating ways for us to explore deeper parts of ourselves.
Yeah, it sounds like it's another way of exploring who you are, but on a deeper level.
Yeah.
And I wonder if, because you're definitely a deep thinker. I think you contemplate purpose, life, and a lot of the, intangibles, as they say. Did you have that when you were younger? Like, did you feel like you had so many questions?
I think so. I think I was a bit of an odd kid. Not odd, like nobody else, I think, noticed it, but I knew that I was asking questions that other people weren't asking. And I sometimes wondered if it was because I was growing up in like such a cross-cultural household where my parents, my mom and dad, were like fundamentally had different views on a lot of things. And so as a kid, that was confusing to me. I remember being like 9 or 10 and being like, but mom says this and dad says that. And I was doing mental gymnastics to try and like go, well, how can that be then? That means there's no right answer. Yeah. And that taught me that, I get to choose what the right answer is. And I think that's informed my life going forwards. But yeah, I've had, again, also looking back, mentors that I didn't realize were mentors. My best friend's mom was a total brilliant hippie that had traveled the world and was a vegan and also an entrepreneur and many, many things. And she and I would have deep conversations about her time living in Japan as a white woman and calligraphy and spirituality and what she believes in. And I would do that with all of my neighbors and all of my friends' parents. Like, I was very interested in what adults had to say when I was really young. And I was just that kid that would pick everyone's brain, kind of like what podcasts are now.
Yeah.
And I would just sit down over tea and be like, how did you guys meet? How does your relationship work? Do you guys fight a lot? Like probably really inappropriate questions sometimes too, but I was so fascinated with, how different families worked, how different marriages worked, how different careers worked.
Was it driven by anxiety at all when you were younger? Not having that right answer or the truth and having all these questions. And were you anxious to try to find the truth or
Maybe.
the right answer?
Yeah, I think maybe at the beginning there was that. I also remember, like, I was a real quote collector when I was little. And gosh, I'm just jogging it now. There was a quote on my dad's secretary's desk that said something like, you couldn't possibly make all the mistakes there are in the world. So go learn from other people's mistakes. I'm totally paraphrasing.
Yeah.
But that informed my childhood a lot. I was like, oh, that's right. I'm not going to be able to be all of the different types of children or the different types of people. And so, I should go talk to a pilot and learn about all of the mistakes he's made. And I should go talk to a business person and I should talk about whatever, and different families and different marriages and different, like, did you want kids? Do you like that you had a son first and then a daughter? Or did you want the other way around? And I just thought, wow, you can learn so much every day from everyone around you.
The tale of a curious kid.
Yeah. And so, I guess I was a little bit odd in that way, but I did feel like I really would ask questions and put myself, I was enough of an empath that when someone told me their experience in something, I felt like I could transport myself into their shoes and live it. And it probably wasn't 100% download, but I got like a 90% download. Like, oh, that was that experience for them. Okay, I'm going to pretend that was my own experience, and I don't have to do that ever again.
Okay. I'm sort of kicking myself right now for not booking another hour because I think there's a lot of stuff we could probably cover, and we haven't been we didn't touch on your entrepreneurial side and what you're doing there. But I'm sure we'll have a chance to speak about this down the road.
Happy to come back whenever.
This was a pleasure, genuinely, wealth of wisdom, and
thank you for the questions. I really appreciate it, Munir.
Thank you.